Hi guys, welcome to the channel of love. Okay, it's study group time. I am in the lounge, lounging. On the sofa, we're going to read the story from here, the story. You'll see it when you believe it. Okay, so we was on chapter 6, Synchronization. I've done a part 1. I believe we are starting with what are these connectors made of. Okay. When we examine the connectors between form and form, we can clearly delineate precisely what makes up these bonds. Once we move to the area of formlessness, we must stop trying, we must stop relying on our senses and use intuition to tell us how connections link thoughts to form and thoughts to thoughts. 3 possibilities for what constitutes thought are: 1. Energy that resonates in the universe. 2. Invisible waves, vibrating so fast that we cannot perceive or measure them. 3. Part of morphogenic, magnetic-like fields that surround members of a species. But in spite of a great deal of speculation and research, and many books devoted to analysing these subjects, there is still no agreement on what constitutes thought and how thoughts are transmitted. And so I suggest that we shift from analysis to synthesis. Analysis is a form of intellectual violence wherein we break up an object of study, look for patterns, try to put it into a scientific mode, and come up with a formula. Synthesis is a way of bringing everything together by starting from what is obvious. Thoughts are formless. They exist in our universe. We participate in this process. We do not need a formula to tell us there is a connection between thought and everything that we do. We know that we cannot store thoughts in a container. Thoughts are, in some way, a part of the invisible world that exists, though hidden from us. Reshad Feld, writing in his thought-provoking novel The Invisible Way, presented this brief dialogue. I understand what you are saying, John, Nur replied. There was a time when I could see that other world. Each idea was a shape that could be understood, rather than seen with the eyes. Reshad Feld's words suggest a world that we have been impervious to because of our experience of living almost exclusively in form. The world of ideas, of thought, this amorphous, formless stuff called thought, which both originates with a person and, simultaneously, is that person. Thought is out there and in there at the same time. It is everywhere. Energy, perhaps. A resonance, perhaps. A chain link of morphogenic fields, perhaps. Invisible, definitely. Something from which we can never escape, definitely. Just try not thinking for even a few moments, and you will see that thought is something that you are inextricably tied into. Ooh, okay. Once you accept that thoughts could possibly exist outside of you, then you are on your way to understanding synchronicity. The hookup between seemingly unconnected events is really the hookup of thoughts, the essence of our universe, this vibrating energy that we cannot see or define. Similarly, the hookup between your thoughts and those of someone else is easier to consider with the idea that thought is energy flowing, unimpeded in the universe, not just in one individual. Those seeming coincidences seem elegantly appropriate when we are tuned in to the dimension of thought. The answer for me to the question, what are these connectors made of, is simply, they are thoughts. Thoughts, contemplated as energy, are hooking up not out of coincidence, but because we are both the source of thought and a part of universal thought. The ability to be thought and create thought gives us the ability to make virtually any connection to thought that we choose. As we awaken to this probability, coincidences no longer are surprising. Before long, we come to expect them. And then, transformation, as we are able to create them at will. Acknowledgement of synchronicity in our lives nurtures our divine connection to the invisible, formless world. It allows us to begin the awakening process and to see that we can use our ability to think and be thought to reshape and redirect our entire lives. Oh, okay. Lily's chilled out on the floor. Tia's listening at the doorway. And Jasper's sound asleep on his own personal chair. He's listening. The awakening process. Stage 1. Your beginnings on the path. Remember when your heart was broken and you felt you would never get over the trauma? Okay, let's settle into this. Takes a little while just to get settled. The awakening process. Stage 1. I was eating crisps. I've got like crumbs on me. Come on, Lucy, the awakening process. Okay. Stage 1. Your beginnings on the path. Remember when your heart was broken and you felt you would never get over the trauma? Your mind probably seemed to be working against you because of your endlessly painful thoughts of how miserable you were right then and how awful the future seemed. Perhaps it was a romantic crisis, a divorce, a financial disaster, an illness or accident of some kind. You were unable to view it with hindsight. The experience of a crisis immobilises us for a long period of time. Our mind is focused on the disaster aspects of the situation, and we are unable to function effectively. We are unable to sleep or eat, and do not know how we are going to get past the terrible set of circumstances. We use our minds to focus on what is wrong, how painful it is, and how terrible it is going to be in the future. Advice from friends and relatives seems unrelated to our problem and usually results in anger and frustration. We cannot see any way out of our misery. This is a typical response for all of us who are travelling our life paths in the belief that the external signposts are all there is to our reality. We cannot imagine that there is a valuable lesson in the trauma. We reject any suggestions that someday we will recall this experience as a necessary step in our development. We simply want to wallow in our hurt, believing that someone or something outside of us is creating this pain, and wishing that those externals would change. I acknowledge having been in this place for a part of my life. I can recall being immobilised over romantic and family crisis, and being so sad and weepy that I functioned ineffectively. My mind seemed to be stuck in place on a particular problem, and I was unable to go more than a few minutes without having those thoughts in my head. I felt possessed by the problem and could not imagine why this was happening to me, nor could I visualise anything positive ever resulting from these difficulties. Just making sure I'm recording. Okay. All of us at this point on our personal journey of awakening are possessed by our traumas. We truly believe that the events are making us unhappy and have not yet learned that we are stranded in the misery by the way that we are processing the events. J. Krishnamurti, in Commentaries on Living, writes of a man who is reacting to the loss of his wife. I used to paint, but now I can't touch the brushes or look at the things I have done. For the last 6 months, I also have seemed to be dead. The other day I picked up the brushes and they were strangers to me. Before, I didn't even know I held a brush in my hand, and now it has weight. It is cumbersome. I have often walked to the river, wanting never to come back, but I always did. I couldn't see people, as her face was always there. I sleep, dream, and eat with her, but I know it can never be the same again. I have tried to forget, but do what I will, it can never be the same again. I used to listen to the birds, but now I want to destroy everything. I can't go on like this. I haven't seen any of our friends since then, and without her, they mean nothing to me. What am I to do? The widower describes dramatically how his mind is stuck in suffering. All of us have experienced or will experience similar painful emotions. We are unable to consider that there may be a gift in the unfolding drama that is our life in the moment. Hello, Tia. Would you like to come and sit up here? She very rarely comes onto the lap, but she will sit here. We're going to sit down and listen. Okay. How are you? She might talk. You might get to see her talk. How are you doing? Okay. Let me have some coffee. I'm just coming round. She's a bit of a scaredy cat. She doesn't like sudden movements or loud noises, do you? You're the baby. Not on the keypad. I think we're still recording. She's going to sit at the edge there. You just see her colouring there. Okay. She's there. On this little stool, footstool. Oh, there she is. I told you she's very observant. She's a jumpy cat. Okay, leave the screen, darling. Jasper's stirring. Lily's up. What's going on? Should we look at stage 2? The middle ground. As we become more awakened, we use our power to create our world through thought in a much more transcendent way. Looking back, we almost always see the benefit to us. The divorce that we thought we would never get over now seems to be the best thing that ever happened. Youthful crises, which felt life-threatening at the time, now seem a natural part of our development. The bout with alcohol addiction that was ruining a life is now viewed as the most important thing ever experienced. It taught how much strength was really deep down inside, even though days of drunkenness seemed to destroy all that was important at the time. The bankruptcy is seen as the necessary catalyst that caused a shift to a more rewarding way of life. The severe illness is recognised as the message to re-examine priorities and slow down. Hindsight provides new eyes to see the opportunity in what was happening at earlier stages of life. Stage 2 is the middle ground of enlightenment, because it is the place where we no longer need hindsight to see the opportunity. As we approach this stage, we are becoming aware of the benefits right now as it is happening. We stop focusing on thoughts of what is missing and stop catastrophizing about the future. Instead, we shift to what is in this for me right now. How can I turn this into an opportunity without having to go through years of suffering before I see how necessary this all is? This is an important step in the enlightenment process and helps us to see how synchronized the one song really is. Certainly, we still experience the pain and suffering, but we simultaneously know that there is something magnificent in this as well. We are able to be gentle and accepting with ourselves, and to honour and love even the part that is creating this crisis. We probably will not cognitively understand why this pain is occurring right now, but we will have an underlying knowingness and belief in the value of it. I heard Ram Dass describe his feelings during the death of his beloved stepmother. He wondered why she was required to suffer so in the advanced stages of melanoma. He knew in his heart that suffering was a part of the journey and that it always led to something grander. But this horrible pain, this beautiful woman whom he loved so dearly, why? As she passed through the final stages before her death, he noticed that she was becoming more peaceful, and he saw a look of exquisite serenity and joy overtake her, and she seemed to enter a new realm, a blissful state, as she left her form. The suffering was over. Since pain is experienced by the senses in form, she was free, and Ram Dass, watching this scene unfold, said to himself, yes, and even this too leads to a higher state. He saw that the suffering was leading to something grander for her, and he did not need to wait several years to realise it. As she left, he was at peace with her departure, for he knew that death is a reward, not a punishment. He had that peace within himself too, knowing that the suffering had within it a blessing. Stage 2 then involves being in the present moment with everything that we are experiencing, rather than having to spend long periods of time suffering before we realise the blessing inherent in the struggle. I became aware that I was past stage 1 on October the 15th, 1982, in the city of Athens, Greece. I had decided to run the original Greek marathon, and after a training programme, had made the trip to Greece. The distance of 26 plus miles was not threatening to me, since I had already completed 4 marathons. But I had no idea what I was going to encounter when 1,500 of us lined up at the starting line in Marathon, a tiny fishing village 26 and a fraction miles from the finish line at the Olympic Stadium in Athens. The race was delayed by about an hour because of some technical snafus. It was 10:20 a.m. when we finally began, and the temperature was 88 degrees, heading upward into the hottest part of the day. The terrain was a gradual uphill run for almost 17 of the 26 miles. After 15 miles, I knew I was in serious trouble. The heat and uphill running were beginning to take their toll. Runners were dropping out. Some were on the side of the road, vomiting, and many, victims of heat exhaustion, were being placed in Red Cross ambulances. I could feel myself getting queasy, and for the first time in my running career, I stopped in the middle of a race and had to lie down and give in to nausea and vomiting. I would stay on the ground, drink a quart or so of water, and then get back up and run a few more miles, and then be back on the ground. By the 21-mile mark, I was at a point of physical exhaustion that I had never experienced before. I was shaking and vomiting green bile, but unable to fathom that I had flown all the way to Greece to accomplish something that I had dreamed about for years and was not able to finish the race. I simply could not let that thought into my consciousness. I contemplated what it would be like to fly back to the United States and then look back at this moment and see what benefit there was in it for me. I could not get that picture as I lay on the street 5 miles outside the city of Athens with people coming to my aid, telling me to get into the ambulance for the ride back to the Olympic Stadium. So I stayed in the moment and asked myself what blessing or opportunity there was in this. I put my suffering aside and genuinely asked myself if I really wanted to go back home without having completed what I had set out to do. Could I somehow reach down inside myself and find the will, through thought, to run for 5 more miles? Something came over me at that moment that I can only describe as a miracle. I felt that I was lying there in the heat and vomit to see if I had the inner courage to do what seemed impossible at that moment. 5 more miles at that moment seemed like 500. Yet, I saw with my thoughts that I could use that situation as a blessing and truly grow as a human being by transcending my physical condition. My physical insides literally changed. I went from weakness to strength in a moment. The moment when I gave myself permission to see the opportunity to discover how much strength I could draw on. Getting interesting now, Tia. Little ears poking up. I righted myself, told the ambulance attendants to help someone else, and I proceeded towards the finish line 5 miles ahead. As I entered Athens, I realised that my troubles were not over. The streets had not been blocked off, and so we were required to run down the highway on the lane markers with cars driving alongside us and policemen trying to keep the automobiles away from the runners. The fumes were the worst I had ever experienced in my life. Cars were changing lanes right in front of runners, and drivers ignoring the pleadings of the policemen attempting to direct traffic. It was growing hotter by the moment, yet with each new obstacle, my resolve seemed to intensify, and my legs stopped cramping and quivering. I was getting stronger, not weaker. I finished that race. I finished despite having spent almost 30 minutes on the ground. I finished in the top third overall, which was my highest finish ever, even though it was my slowest time. But the time was insignificant. So too were the cheers and the medals we received. I had learned something very valuable about myself, and I did not have to wait several years to know what the blessing was in the suffering. This short verse from Raymond's Ng's Reflections from the Soul sums up my thoughts nicely. Out of mud, the lovely lotus blossoms. Out of trials, something higher rise. When we can seize that higher something in the moments we are advancing, along the path towards that third and ultimate stage wherein pure synchronicity lies, and where we take a much more active role in co-creating our world. Stage 3. Pure synchronicity. If stage 1 of enlightenment is to notice with the benefit of hindsight that every obstacle is an opportunity, and stage 2 is to catch ourselves as the obstacle appears, noticing the blessing as it happens, you are probably wondering, what else is there? The answer is difficult to comprehend for those who cannot see anything beyond their form. For the third and higher state of enlightenment gives us the choice of thought at its purest. It offers the possibility of thought experienced without intermediary, carry on, material, so-called causes. It is synchronicity in context with the notion that we are thought, and that thoughts reside both within and outside of us. Every time she appears or goes away, I get kind of like nasal congestion. Lily and Jasper are both having a good scratching fest over there. Jeez, why are you irritated? I feel like I want to snort. It's like, okay, maybe a cough. That doesn't do it. I've got to sniff. What's going on? I'm blocked. Back of my nasal passage. have a pigeon that sits on a rooftop. I've just looked over and he's just flown off. Where's everyone flying? Where's everyone flying to? Okay, let's read about stage 3. I felt like I was giving my boobs a wiggle. Sorry, I wasn't. I was just like, felt a bit scrunched up. Oh, it's a funny study group. Hey, it's all good. We're chilling today. Okay. Stage 3, pure synchronization. If stage 1 of enlightenment is to notice with the benefit of hindsight that every obstacle is an opportunity, and stage 2 is to catch ourselves as the obstacle appears, noticing the blessing as it is happening, you are probably wondering what else is there. The answer is difficult to comprehend for those who cannot see anything beyond their form. For the third and higher stage of enlightenment gives us the choice of thought at its purest. It offers the possibility of thought experienced without intermediary, material, so-called causes. It is synchronicity in context with the notion that we are thought, and that thoughts reside both within and outside of us. In this stage of enlightenment, we are able to see the obstacles on the horizon as simply events, which we have a choice about. At this stage, we do not need to create or become caught up in the obstacles to have the learning experience. The negative sounding obstacle is replaced with the more neutral term, event. Gonna get settled. Do you want to come up here? Do you want to come up here? Would you like to come and sit over here? Come on then. Did you just go for a little break? That's fine. That's it. Sit up there. Good girl. Okay. The negative sounding obstacle is replaced by the more neutral term event. I believe that today, at this point of my development, I do not need to get so sick running a marathon to experience myself in thought as I did in the Greek marathon to experience, as I did in the Greek marathon. I can be with that strength or essence of thought. We've got distracted, haven't we? Okay. I can be with that strength or essence or thought or self in thought if I so choose. I can know that aspect of myself without having to go through an obstacle or event. And yes, in this third stage, the lotus blossom can bloom in thought without needing the mud to create it. Just clear my nasal passage again. The divine part of ourselves, which I have labelled thought, and God is a force in the universe which we are capable of tuning into if we believe in it and if we are willing. In the purest stage of synchronicity, we have a choice about experiencing thought in form or in pure thought. I'm so tickly. I'm so sorry, guys. We've got to get through this chapter. I'm not going to stop. I'm not editing. I don't do that shit. Okay. I am so tickly. The kids are out the front there having fun, aren't they? Okay. Just seeing where Lily's off to. What's this hair that's all tickling me? It's those sylph fairies. The divine part of ourselves, which I have labelled, somebody comes through the door. What's with the distractions? What was that? Her eyes are so big. Can everyone just calm down? The sun's going down, isn't it? It's 7 o'clock. Okay. Should we carry on? Let's get this third stage over with. And then I can sign off. I think we might need a part 3. There's loads left. We'll see. The divine part of ourselves, which I have labelled thought, and God is a force in the universe which we are capable of tuning into if we believe in it and if we are willing. In the purest stage of synchronicity, We have a choice about experiencing thought in form or in pure thought. We get an intuitive sense that to act or continue acting in a certain way is creating a forthcoming event. Inner intuition tells us that we are heading towards this situation, and we sense we have a choice about whether or not we need to go down this road again. In pure synchronicity, we are able to bypass the experience in form by having the thought without the need to play it out in form. It is literally getting out in front of it rather than learning from it through hindsight or in the present moment. When we permit thought its synchronized flow, its passage as part of the perfection without resistance or denial, it flows through naturally without need to manifest eternally. Recently, my wife and I were considering purchasing a new home, which was under construction. We liked everything about it and planned to sign a contract. Then both of us had an intuitive feeling that there were difficulties down the road if we made such a commitment. We had come to trust those inner signals, and so we decided, simply on the basis of our intuition, not to enter into an agreement with the builder. Just got something that's come up here. Just dismiss that. Okay. Let's get back to not signing this contract. We had come to trust those inner signals, and so we decided, simply on the basis of our intuition, not to enter into an agreement with the builder. At previous times in our life together, we have made some decisions that turned out to be costly. Here we were, at least at stage 2, knowing that we had lessons to learn. The blessing in those obstacles turned out to be that we learned to trust our inner signals and avoid unpleasant outcomes in the future. That third stage of enlightenment, in which my wife and I are able to get out in front of ourselves and have choice about an impending event, occurs regularly when we are in disagreement. We can both see such events coming, and we are willing to look ahead and live out, in our thoughts, the consequences of acting in certain ways. A great deal of suffering is eliminated by contacting the obstacle in thought only, and then removing the need to translate it into form. Utilising thought to write the script for ourselves in form is a marvellous stage to get to in life. Here, in partnership with our inner selves, we can write the script for our outer selves in the most loving way imaginable. We can live in that graceful dimension of formless thoughts almost exclusively, programming for the form all that it needs to experience in its self-actualizing process. At the same time, having learned some lessons through traumas, we do not need to keep repeating them. In stage 1, we find the Krishnamurti dialogue with the man who was experiencing painful suffering over the loss of his wife. Let us look now at the next segment of that conversation. There must be suffering as long as there is no understanding of the ways of the self, and the ways of the self are to be discovered only in the action of relationship. But my relationship has come to an end. There is no end to relationship. There may be the end of a particular relationship, but relationship can never end. To be is to be related, and nothing else can live in isolation. Though we try to isolate ourselves through a particular relationship, such isolation will inevitably breed sorrow. Sorrow is the process of isolation. Can life ever be what it has been? Can the joy of yesterday ever be repeated today? The desire for repetition arises only when there is no joy today. When today is empty, we look to the past or to the future. We have the power to use our minds to make the present joyful, with our ability to use thought. Loss of a particular relationship is unbearable when there is no relationship to self. This is the magic of synchronicity. The traumas and obstacles are truly the events to enable us to understand, to know the self. Thoughts meet thoughts, and you decide whether to transfer them into form or not. As you more and more tune in to the exquisite force that is your mind, trusting in yourself as the source of thoughts, the mystery slowly but surely begins to fade, and it makes more and more sense to you. Events that seemed so impossible to figure out now become nothing more than thoughts meeting thoughts in a universe that is all vibrating thought. Where you once said, "Wow, I simply can't believe the remarkable string of coincidences that led up to this," you start saying, "I trust it all." Let me share with you more of how this has worked for me. And we will do on the next trip. On the next trip. Okay, because there's still quite a lot left on our next session. Because it's called Miracles. Okay, guys. A lot to digest. It's not an easy read, is it? Okay. But we're on stage 3. That's awesome. Okay, I'm going to go. Take care. Much love. Bye for now.